talking about the Martha Shoffner story and situation. Our state treasurer arrested over the weekend for extortion. She had her first day in court yesterday, and a lot of the details came out. And it is pretty amazing, the payouts and pie boxes and the different things that went on. And it makes a very complicated story. All you hear about these days is the pie payouts. So we're going to talk about some of the details and the different angles of this story. I'm joined with Talk Business reporters and bloggers, Jason Tolbert. Jason, good morning.
Good morning. Good to be here, Alice.
Appreciate you. And also Michael Cook. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This has clearly been going on for some time, and both of you have covered this for a long time. But it all came to a head over the weekend. I know, Jason, you were keeping up with the developments and as they happen and talking with different folks. But your initial piece on your initial thoughts on this as it came down Saturday that she was arrested for extortion, and we're hearing about all this money used from the state treasurer's office being funneled to one particular firm, but the idea of the payback for her, $6,000 in a pie box, is just bizarre.
Yeah, it's just bizarre. When I heard the details on Monday, after the complaint was filed by the U.S. District Attorney, and we started reading about the money in the pie box, how to get it in a cigarette pack in her kitchen. I mean, it felt like a scene from Shawshank Redemption. I mean, it felt bizarre, almost is this a joke or is this a real thing? And then when you realized it was what she actually did, it was just, how could anyone think they could get away with this?
Well, and it shades of William Jefferson in Louisiana, the money in the freezer.
Sure,
yeah.
Sure. Someone asked me yesterday, is she naive or is she just this arrogant? I said, I think it's a little bit of both.
Right.
I think she was naive to think she could get away with it, and she was also arrogant enough to think she was entitled to it. I mean, if you read some of the things she said, well, I couldn't afford this luxury apartment on a $50,000 a year salary. And so, it's almost like she felt like, well, I just have to take this money in order to have this lifestyle that I've become accustomed to.
And that's the kind of thing, you've been around politics, we all have been around politics long enough. If you can't afford a $54,000 a year job, you don't run for exactly. a $54,000 a year job. Exactly. Michael, your thoughts on this?
Well, this is a mess. Although it's interesting, one thing you pointed about earlier, Martha Shoffner has a way of, whenever there's a complicated controversy, of her involvement makes it simpler to understand, in that, you remember last year there were the hearings about her selling off bonds too early. And, bonds are a complicated issue and kind of hard to explain to the average Arkansan. I don't even understand it all the time. But the fact that she skipped the meeting, skipped when she was subpoenaed or something like that, and they had to go find her, helped made that scandal or problem easy to understand. Of course, then the word that comes out about her accepting bribes in a pie box again makes a complicated issue easy to understand. And now, it's different. We had a previous scandal in the 90s with Jim Guy Tucker, who had been under investigation and had a trial. And of course, he always refuted the charges and maintained his innocence. Although, from reading the reports, it seems like Martha Shoffner has admitted to it, if I read everything correctly, that she admitted it was wrong to the federal agents. So she's already said, she almost basically said she's done it. So
she was caught with her finger in the pie.
Exactly.
Caught with her finger in the pie.
Exactly. So it's time for her to resign, and I'll be curious to see what kind of Senate she gets and how the trial progresses and who the informants are. I mean, it's a sad story, and Martha was never known as the brightest bulb in the box, so I think she's a little bit naive. It was interesting in the paper. It seems like back in January, and I think Jason even mentioned on his blog that it was publicly reported that she was being investigated by the federal government. I mean, number one, you should never ever take bribes as a public official. That's a no-brainer. But number two, if the paper says you're under investigation, maybe you should kind of cool it to not take bribes. I mean, I've seen enough Law and Order episodes to know that maybe you should kind of chill out.
Maybe you think someone might be watching your activity, and people might be talking.
Right.
We'll talk about the political implications about this in the next segment, but I want to talk more about the details of this. We won't ask you to give us your knowledge of bond transaction with state government, but the overall picture is that the Treasury Office dealing with this type of activity, and in this case, we're talking a total of what we know of, $1.6 billion worth of bond business, and basically all of it was shifted to one bond firm, the St. Bernard's, and these bond dealers received $2.3 million in commission, and according to the complaint and what she's acknowledged is that they paid in return $6,000 every 6 months for her rent.
Just want to interrupt. We don't know for sure that that's the bond broker. The U.S. attorney was very clear yesterday that they're not revealing their source. They're referring to them as an anonymous source. Based on the facts, it's pretty safe to assume that's the broker, but that has not come out. I think it will come out in the next few days who the broker is. But if you look at the amount of business that they did with that broker, you certainly got to suspect they're probably at the top of the list. But it's also safe to point out here, we're talking about billions of dollars in business in bonds. We're not necessarily talking about that amount of potential loss for the state. I think loss for the state's probably somewhere maybe in the neighborhood of several $100,000 that they could have gotten maybe slightly better yields on the bonds. It's not like they were necessarily funneling lots of money that was just completely being lost. It was, they may have bought a bond at 1.5%, and they could have gotten it for 1 3/4%. They could have maybe got a slightly better bond. So I think it's important to point that out.
Good, that's a great point. And Michael, your thoughts overall on this? It's a complicated issue, but when it boils down to is cash payouts for shifting business. What does this do about trust in government here in Arkansas?
Well, a couple things. Number one, and maybe you guys can help me, it seems like, on a side note, is this the first kind of major female office holder that has been caught up in a corruption scandal that we can think of? I can't, just as a random side note in terms of
I think so.
So interesting, in terms of that aspect of it. And then, of course, it kind of makes you angry and sad at the same time. I mean, like I said, the bond business, it's tough to understand, but there's no need to explain taking bribes.
Sure.
We all get that basic concept, and taking money you should not be taking. It hurts everybody. It hurts Democrats, hurts Republicans, because then it erodes that trust. Because far and away, I've worked with a lot of political candidates and a lot of elected office holders. 99% of them, I think, always want to do good, always try to do good. Even people I vigorously disagree with on policy issues and don't think they should be in office, I honestly believe they believe what they're doing is right, that they're honest and that they're truthful. But then you have somebody like a Martha Shoffner comes along, and it just hurts everybody, Democrats and Republicans, and it continues that erosion in faith in government.
Right. My guests are Michael Cook and Jason Tolbert from Talk Business. One other issue quickly before we go to break, in that you want to have faith in government. And clearly this has been going on for quite some time. And the issue that Cord brought up and has been discussed amongst those involved here is, without a doubt, she's innocent until proven guilty, but she's admitted to quite a bit of this. The FBI's pretty much have her, as Jason said, with their finger in the pie. But this has evidently been reported to those, as they call, on the second floor at the state capitol, officials higher than the treasurer's office quite some time ago, but nothing was done. If that proves to be true, that's a whole other issue in and of itself.
Well, hold on. I mean, are you talking about bribery, that the people on the second floor knew about the bribery? That one, I think that's going a bridge too far. I mean, I think the people on the second floor knew about Martha Shoffner's just general incompetence as a state treasurer. Selling, I don't know anything about the bond business, but I understand the basic concept of if you sell something before the maturity date, you lose money. I mean, that's just gross incompetence right there. But I don't think that anybody, on the second floor has any knowledge of this. In fact, I've talked to people on the second floor. They found out Saturday when she was arrested. They didn't know anything about it. So I think that's kind of going a little too far on that one, I think.
Well, we can talk about this more after the break, but I think one of the things that we're learning, a lot of people are learning, the state treasurer, the state auditor, some of these constitutional officers, they're only accountable to the voters every 4 years.
Right.
They have no oversight. If this had been somebody over at the Department of Finance Administration that was doing this, they would have been fired immediately. This wouldn't have gone on as long as it went on. But the fact that this is an elected official, she's only elected once every 4 years, the only way to remove her is impeachment. That's a real problem when they get out of line because there's nobody that they're accountable to that can fire them for doing this sort of thing.
Right. Very good point. And we'll talk about impeachment, what happens with her future should she step down, and the political implications of this with Michael Cook and Jason Tolbert of Talk Business. We'll talk about that after this break.